So before we go into the client configuration with the how the tenant configures his SAML configuration, we left a couple of points in the IDP. Um, so we'll go to the points. So the first thing being, we have registered our role base inside Salesforce. That is, we have registered the SP in the IDP. So the IDP, which is Salesforce, knows the information about role base. But how does role base know about the IDP? So for this, all the IDPs use the IDP metadata file. So some of the, it can be Salesforce, it can be Ping1. They have a IDP metadata file. So this IDP metadata file may be exposed by a URL, or it can be in the configuration. So right now in Salesforce, we can find the metadata file by going to the setup, manage apps, connected apps. If you remember the name of the connection we created, it is SAML demo. So if we go inside the SAML demo, we can see a bunch of stuff about the app, but the one which we are interested in right now is SAML login information. So the SAML login information, if you see view and download SAML endpoint metadata, this is nothing but the IDP metadata we want. So once we download it, uh, we can see that there is a metadata file created. So I renamed the file and to saml.xml, and I placed it in my config folder. You can place it anywhere you want. It's just so that for tenant based, for tenant level SAML, you can place it anywhere you want. I placed it in the config folder. So now I have the IDP metadata, which is the metadata about the IDP. So now we have the information to connect to the IDP, but what is the IDP going to send as a response? So the concept of sending custom attributes is there in IDP. So if you see here, every IDP, be it Ping1, they have a way in which they can give attributes. So for Salesforce, you can add a new attribute. So what I did is the attribute key which should be delivered should be UID, and its value should be the user's username. In this case, the username would come to be my user underscore y98. So this is going to be sent as a UID, and this UID should be mapped against my login name. If you can see here, uh, because this login name is going to give information about the user. So now it is going to send the login name to be my user underscore this particular user. So we need to make sure that we have a user in role base which will actually uh, have that as the login name. If you can see, I created a user with that particular name. If you see, his login name is my user. So you should make sure that the name of the login name should be an actual name in the IDP. So once that is done, and we added our attributes, everything from the part of IDP side is set, except a single small note. So we have a way in which we can give permission to only a group of profiles. So in Salesforce, there's manage profiles. Once you go there, you can actually set what type of users or user groups can access this particular app. So I put it as system administrator. You can save it as whatever you want. So once this is set, we can go to the actual tenant configuration. The name is the name, any name we can give for this connection. So the issuer or the IDP entity ID, how do we find this? So you have the entity ID metadata, you have the IDP metadata with you. So once you go to the IDP metadata, you can actually see that there is an entity ID at the top of the file which says http dev ed my salesforce. So that is the actual IDP ID which I gave. And then there is a IDP provider metadata, which is the file which we just downloaded. So I know my file, I pasted it in saml.xml. So I'll use that. And then it is the service provider entity ID. So the service provider entity ID is given by the administrator. You can find it in the SP metadata file, or it could be communicated by the admin to the tenant. So this is actually the ID we have given even in our Salesforce. If you remember, this is the entity ID. I told it would be better if we give the domain name. So we have given this particular thing. So that is configured again here. So once that is done, the attribute map. So this is where the login name, which is the integration name in Rollbase, is actually mapped to the custom attribute, which is coming, which is to be UID, which gives the login name of the user in Salesforce. So once this is set, identity provider login URL. So there's nothing but we have an entry at the bottom, single sign-on service. Inside this, in the post location, you can find the login URL. You can just copy paste this stuff here. So once you're done with this, you can save this stuff and open a different session. So now I need to initiate the process of SAML login for this particular customer. So what I do is I copy paste the login URL, which I have to invoke. So I'll now hit this particular URL. So now the first diagram which I showed you in the start will make sense. So if you see, the user hits the service provider, that is the URL which I'm about to hit right now. So the service provider, which is Rollbase, makes a SAML request to the IDP, which is Salesforce, and gets a response from them back. So based on the response, we'll get some custom attributes which will log in the user. So that is how this picture will make sense once we hit this URL. So once I hit this URL, you can actually see that the URL is changed to Salesforce because we contacted the IDP now. So if I give my details, so I've given my details. So this is the two-factor authentication for Salesforce. So I just need to quickly give the ID for it, the passcode. So this is done and pasted. Now the response comes back to Rollbase. And once you hit, you're actually inside Rollbase now, as you can see the URL. So this is the Rollbase. And as you can observe, the first name of the guy has changed to Srikant123 Garu, which is uh, actually the name inside IDP. So whatever attributes you map, the role base takes care of the updating these values in the role base with the IDP's values. So this is way you can configure all the role base as well as IDP to enable SAML authentication. Hope this helps. Thanks.